So you are here for our breakfast presentation for today. This is a series of 3 presentations by some very exciting organizations and groups, collectives of filmmakers who we think are really tackling some of the most pressing issues in our field. The format of this event is going to be different than yesterday's breakfast presentations. I'm just going to give a quick overview before turning it over to our first group to blitz through these presentations. So the format is every single group is going to give 15-minute overviews or presentations of their work. The first group is the DPA's Producing Towards Equity Task Force, going to be talking about the Producing Towards Equity series of workshops. The second group is going to be 2 representatives who have been working on the Nonfiction Core app 2.0. Thank you to Hajnal and Rahi, who will be presenting second. And the final presenter will be Sean Welsh of Matchbox, who will be talking about a new initiative called Sidecard, which is very near and dear to our hearts here because of all of our work at the conference on access for folks who have low vision or might be deaf or hard of hearing. After these 15-minute presentations, so after 45 minutes, we will then break out into 3 separate rooms where attendees will receive 30 minutes to chat more in depth with each of these groups about their initiatives. For those who would like to chat with Sean Welsh about Matchbox, you should say in this Zoom that you are in right now or in this room if you are here at the IDA office. And for the other 2 groups, we will be putting into chat the Zoom rooms that you should move into in order to talk with those presenters. So without further ado, I have the 4 members who have been working on Producing Towards Equity from the Documentary Producers Alliance here with us. We have Lance Kramer, if you could just give a little wave, in person, Sabrina Avilés also in person, and we have Susan Kaplan and Carletta on screen. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over to you.
Is that all coming through at all? Yes, good, great. Thank you, Abby, for having us here. My name is Lance Kramer. He, him pronouns. I'm one of the members of the Documentary Producers Alliance, Producing Towards Equity committee that's been developing this program. As Abby said, we're just going to kind of walk through very quickly a little bit about what this program is, and then we'll have more time in the breakout rooms to talk about it. But a little background context. So the Documentary Producers Alliance, since about 2016, when we were founded as a collective, we've worked to identify structural issues and advocate for more sustainable and equitable business practices, particularly for documentary producers in what I think we all know is a field where unpaid labor, structural inequity, and are all too pervasive of norms. And some of our specific initiatives that we've developed over the last 5 or 6 years have been the development of crediting guidelines, guidelines for the documentary investment waterfall, and also labor guidelines, just to name a few. And so just a little bit about kind of the purpose behind the DPA and this project, for documentary producers who often stand at the intersection of story, financing, production, HR, distribution, marketing. We're kind of working on all these different areas and play such a critical and major role in the creative and the financial success of a project. But then despite this critical role, producers are also facing grave financial, career instability, and that would be just enough. But then on top of that, producers face lack of recognition, support, lack of professional development, and all of that is all kind of wrapped up in a field that's grappling with its own internal structural discrimination, inequity, and racism. So this is all kind of things that so many people are facing on just a daily basis, and this isn't new. It's been going on for so many years. And so because these harmful practices, at least in our view, are often learned through methodologies that have been long perpetuated by these inequitable and discriminatory structures. If they were learned, then our belief is that there's unlearning to do around even just these kind of very practical aspects of producing that can show up in exacerbating the inequitable structures, like crediting that can work against producers and their teams, funding that prioritizes financiers over filmmakers, hiring practices that can that are dominated by white people and those who carry other institutionalized privilege, and so many other things that I could go on naming. And so several years ago, in partnership with the IDA, and also thankfully with some support from the National Endowment for the Arts, we began developing this Producing Towards Equity workshop series as an initiative to educate producers in ways that we as producers can dismantle or begin to dismantle inequitable producing practices and try to rebuild new ones that are more fair and just, and those that can provide producers more opportunities for learning and dialogue that may be difficult to access otherwise in our day-to-day producing.
Do you want to talk? How about I'll take it over to you, Carletta.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again, excuse me, for this opportunity. Basically, the mission of PTE is, with recent COVID and racial inequity crisis happening and the magnitude of issues that producers face already, in addition to getting their projects funded, keeping their film careers on track, producers that are Black, Indigenous, people of color have a greater time getting those things done. So as minority producers have less access, guidance, and support, PTE was developed through the DPA. It's a free of charge and interactive, accessible 3-part workshop series that will offer interactive training through the lens of equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the film producing areas of finance, crediting, and labor practices. One of the really important things for us in building this program out was making sure that it would be accessible. So we're targeting anybody who's in documentary filmmaking on all levels and providing this workshop, and there'll be independent producers available to come, as well as anybody who's interested. The overall arch is that it is free and open to anyone, whether you're a member of the DPA or IDA. Our biggest issue is that we want anyone in their career to be able to come and hopefully gain some opportunities from the PTE experience. And I guess I'll kick it back to you.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Avilés. I go with the pronouns he, she, and ella. And I'm really, I'm really happy to be part of this committee because, I mean, I, as a Latina producer, have felt some of those inequities coming up through a system that was mostly dominated by white males. So we're hoping to launch these series of workshops at festivals or other filmmaking convenings in the spring of 2023, and eventually in a virtual format, and we look at it as something organic that will grow and change as we get input from our audiences. And so based on the feedback from the initial workshops, we'll tweak it and adapt it for the virtual, and we hope that it lives beyond these 3 initial workshops. And this is a starting point in our role to build a more equitable system. We want to create discussions and actions that stem from the workshops, and we're also very committed towards the work in the long term, as I said before. The IDA and the DPA, the Documentaries Producers Alliance, and partner collectives will promote the workshops through traditional PR and social media to ensure the maximum and diverse participation. The workshops themselves will equip participants with strategies to bring the best practices back to their own communities. And we hope that this is not just a dialogue between just BIPOC people or white or non-BIPOC people, but that it's all inclusive, not only for BIPOCs, but for disabled communities, also maybe for neurodivergent communities that a lot of times they're not part of this conversation, because this is about dismantling something that is really a culture, and that takes years to dismantle, and long and hard conversations, and possibly uncomfortable conversations. The guidelines themselves will also be available for free download on the DPA's website, ensuring access to the resources for all. And we've been conducting a wide scale of job search for curriculum developers. We're super excited about that, and are nearly complete with the process to put together the team. We're very, very excited. We had how many applicants? About 35. We narrowed it to about half, and now hopefully in the next few weeks we will be hiring our new team, and we'll be launching the workshops, as I said before, in the spring of 2023.
So we'll just wrap, I think, because we're probably at time, but in the breakout room, we'll have a chance if you're interested in volunteering. This has been a volunteer committee-led effort. So if you're interested in getting involved, we're really, even though we've been working on this for a few years, we're still really at the beginning because we haven't even begun to write the curriculum or certainly roll out the actual workshop. So if you're interested in volunteering, there's still opportunities for that. So please join us, or if you'd like to even just give input to us to take into account as the program is being developed, we'd love to hear from you. So that's what we'll be doing in the breakout room. If you don't join the breakout room and you'd like to just follow along and learn more about the series, go to the website, which is documentaryproducersalliance.org, or you can always email our coordinator at docproducersalliance at gmail.com, and they can share more information about the program as we prepare to roll it out. As Sabrina mentioned, it'll roll out in the spring of 2023. So we don't know exactly what festival it will start at first, but if you follow us on social media or email us, we'll share the info.
Also, if you're a representative of a film festival who would like to welcome the Producing Toward Equity series to your space, we would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, we need anyone in the spirit of openness, anyone who's interested in participating or getting connected with the project, please, there's a lot of entry points.
Yeah, and I think also we're looking not only from film festival, but also partnering organization that will help us disseminate the word about this, again, because this is an initiative that we hope that will include just more than just DPA and partnering festivals, but a whole lot of people in the industry.
And this is really quickly, I want to
add
add.
Person in our committee,
Yeah.
which is Susan, who I think in the interest of keeping things moving, we weren't able to have everyone speak, but Susan, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
I was just putting our email, so I will now send the email. So just the email that Lance just mentioned will is up now in the chat box. Susan Kaplan, and my pronouns are her and she. Thank you, Lance. I look forward.
I was just saying, wrapping up really quickly, and just to make sure, even if you aren't a big festival, all festivals are welcome, because we are looking to make it more accessible virtually after our festival circuit run. So like Lance said, anybody's welcome to reach out, and we hope that you will.
All right. Thank you so much to the Producing Toward Equity task force from the DPA. We are going to now move on to the second presentation, but if you look in chat, thank you to Zaf, our Director of Communications, for putting all of the links into chat. Again, it's breakout room 1 if you would like to chat with the first presenters more. Our second presenters are going to be here up on screen now. So thank you, Susan, do you mind? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and also the Nonfiction Core App 2.0, which you might remember from a few years ago in its initial form.
Thanks, Abby. Are we running the slides, or is somebody else from the IDA going to do it? Should I share my screen?
Is it possible for someone from the IDA to run the slide, because we got to look at the notes? If not,
share my screen if it's not. I'll share my screen. Oh, I can't share my screen. It's disabled.
yeah, I can't share mine either.
Should we just go without the slides, I guess?
Yeah.
Abby, is that okay? Oh, somebody's sharing screen. Yay!
Yay.
My
Okay,
audio
so the first
is
slide.
low? Okay, I can. Is this better? Is it better? Can you guys my audio better? Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome.
Yeah. Hajnal, you're a little bit
is that
quiet.
better now still? I'm just gonna get really close to my computer. Can you guys hear me okay?
Good.
Still faint, huh? I don't know why. If I yell, is that better? Yes, okay, I'll just yell, okay? And you guys will have a really big face on your screen, I'm sorry. But welcome everyone, and thank you Abby and the IDA team for having us here and inviting us to join these breakfast sessions. My name is Hajnal, and I'm the Director of Artist Accelerator at Sundance. I'm a Hungarian-Canadian transplant to Venice, California, where I'm currently based on the ancestral lands of the Tongva and the Chumash peoples. I have brown hair, it's pinned back, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So why are we here today? We are here today to share the revamp of the nonfiction core application proposal checklist. So just a little history, the nonfiction core app proposal checklist, it was initially launched over 6 years ago when the IDA and Sundance, we joined forces to create the documentary core application project. This effort really sought to standardize a set of proposal questions, terminology, and response lengths that funding and fiscal sponsorship organizations could incorporate into their application process. So the proposal checklist was meant to always be a living document, right? And it was meant to respond to the shifts in the nonfiction field, which over the years have manifested in various ways, including the ongoing need to address sustainability, safety, security, as well as the desire that we're seeing for holistic culture change, right? To make the field more inclusive, more accessible, and grounded in values-based ethics-first filmmaking practice. So how did we go about this revamp, this rewrite of it? So initially in 2020, the Sundance Documentary Fund, we shifted our application questions. So we actually kind of went rogue from the core app and we shifted our questions away to reflect some of the shifts that we were seeing in the field. And we were seeing other funders do this as well. So then in 2021, we re-engaged the field in partnership with the IDA through virtual conversations and feedback sessions to update the core application proposal checklist. In our process, we heard from over 150 individuals representing independent filmmakers, both directors and producers. We heard from collectives, filmmaking support organizations, and networks. We heard from artist support organizations who were interested in using the core app, but not yet using the core app. And then we heard from organizations that were actively using the core app. So we really incorporated the knowledge, the experience, and the insights that were shared into a draft. And we share after, we wrote a draft, and after initial round of revisions, we once again came together as a community and incorporated some of the new changes into the new core. But we recognized that we needed to further interrogate some of the questions around accountability, power, positionality, community care, safety, and access. So what we did was we convened a small group of volunteers to discuss, refine, and finalize the questions. For me personally, the process has been really rewarding, but also really challenging. During a time when we were isolated in our homes and on our computer screens, this project brought me closer to many colleagues in the field. As a funder, I hope the proposal checklist will reduce the burden on applicants, but it can only do so if all funding organizations adopt the questions into their application processes. And then I also recognize the power and the position that we hold in the ecosystem. And I hope that the proposal checklist will allow us to make more informed and responsible decisions and also have more open and honest conversations with filmmakers and other funders. This work is really, really ongoing. So now I'm really happy to share my Zoom screen and pass it over to Rahi Hasan. So they were an integral part of the small but mighty working group that took the core across the finish line. They will share some of the key changes that we see in this core app. Next slide, please. And this is the new core logo, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to say. We have new colors, and so hopefully everybody likes it. Rahi?
Thank you, Hajnal. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. Okay. Hey, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Rahi Hasan. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a filmmaker and impact strategist. I'm also the co-founder of Undocumented Filmmakers Collective. I'm currently based in the unceded land of Lumbee, Occaneechi, Saponi, Shakori, and the Tuscarora people, also known as Durham, North Carolina. I am a South Asian femme presenting non-binary person with a medium brown skin tone. One side of my head is shaved and the other side has shoulder length black hair. I'm wearing a multicolor red, green, blue dress. Behind me is a blurred Zoom background. I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of the new changes from a filmmaker's perspective and go over the two questions that are you see on the screen. So I'm currently developing my first feature-length documentary called Hoopshika about my mother, who has carved a path of healing and liberation for herself and her community through poetry. This is a very personal film and requires a lot of creative attention. One of the things that I'm noticing in my process is how much of that creative attention that my project needs is taken away by me trying to apply for funding. In the last 2 months, I have applied to over 15 development grants, and my team and I had to rewrite every single one of them, and we already feel burnt out. So it feels really unsustainable to even think about I have to do this process over and over again for production and post-production, completion fund and impact grant and so on, right? So I think the DocCore app was important so filmmakers can avoid that burnout and build creative capacity. And so they can write one application and repurpose it. I think the nonfiction core app, the new name, 2.0, really recenters the filmmakers to prioritize practice over product. So I think about my filmmaking practice, my relationship to the participants of my films, who I feel like I'm in service to, and the audience, who I hope to receive critical engagement from, right? So my project can continue growing. So the questions that were added in the 2.0 version and the new version is calling filmmakers to provide additional information on how we are taking responsibility and holding ourselves accountable in relation to the participants and the audience, and to kind of deconstruct that process of the traditional thinking. It's all about the story. It's about the final product. It's prompting us to reconstruct the process in a more holistic way, including the participants and the audience. So I was a huge advocate for the power and positionality question. I also want to give a quick shout out to Lagaya Romero, filmmaker, who might have been the first person really explained the concept of positionality and how that looks like in filmmaking process. So I think this question really gets to the core of naming and addressing our power and positions of privilege in society, and also as filmmakers in relation to the story and those featured in the story. So the question is prompting you to acknowledge those power and positionality and going deeper to talk about how that impacts your practice. In my practice, I like to break it down in two sections. One is filmmaker and one as me as a person in the society. So I feel like there is an inherent power dynamic between a filmmaker and the participants. And I think traditionally it's been normalized to see directors kind of asserting power over participants in the name of like being in full control, right? So as a filmmaker, how are you shifting that entitlement that director brings into a process more toward your community? I will use, we don't have a lot of time, but I'll use a little example in my case in terms of the power and positionality. My identity is not just a filmmaker, right? So I'm just going to name a list of privilege that I hold. So I am a non-Black person of color, cis presenting, able-bodied, mentally stable, college graduate, English speaking, Sunni Muslim person living in somewhat of a comfortable life in the United States as a permanent resident. So despite all the I experience here, I'm naming some of the privilege that I hold in society, right? In the context of race, gender, sexuality, physical ability, mental health, education, religion, financial status, geographical location, and immigration status. And by analyzing these privilege outside of my filmmaking identity, it allows me to see my participants in a full way and not just as subjects, right? It's not about boxing ourselves into these labels, but it's acknowledging some of the realities that impact our unique lens, perspective, insights, or bias that we bring into our filmmaking process. And I think it's really important to tie the community care question with the power and positionality question. I would bring like our analysis from that answer and allow that to guide our values and ethics of practice of care. If we're not kind of self-reflecting about our own power as filmmaker and providing a checklist of community care, I think we could be missing the point. So again, these questions are not meant to be prescriptive. They are meant to guide filmmakers to see the importance of unpacking these practice questions, eventually then leading to an authentic story. And so like Hajnal said, I would encourage funders to really adopt this new version. Thank you so much. Over to you, Hajnal.
Rahi, every time you speak, I'm like, you're so brilliant. The next slide, please. So we have two more questions that really deal with kind of the relationship that the filmmaker has toward their participants and their story. Yeah, thank you. So one of them is connection and access. So the connection and access question really asks filmmakers to go behind the traditional access question to elaborate on why or how their connection positions them to tell their story, right? And I really love this quote from the Documentary Accountability Working Group, which really gets to the heart of this question for me, which access does not equal insight. Does the filmmaker have trusted relationships with people with lived experience or other knowledge holders that will enable deep insight into the story? And then the next question, which is, kind of closely linked, but slightly different, is the accountability question, which prompts the filmmaker to elaborate on their engagement with their participants or community during the entire production process and seeks to understand their ethics in their process, right? So this is looking at ethics. This looks at the relationship the filmmaker has with their participants and whenever possible aims to further a positive relationship between them. It's about sharing power and engaging with your participants in a dignified, transparent, respectful manner. But at the same time, we also acknowledge that this is not possible on all films. And not the same level of community participation is available. And when this is the case, this question aims to prompt filmmakers to acknowledge this dynamic and really elaborate on the process of seeking informed consent while acknowledging that the production process is just not collaborative. It's not possible. I will quickly just mention some additional changes. In this new core app, I think it's really important to highlight that we also added questions that interrogate and further accessibility by urging funders to provide artists who require accommodations or support through the submission process an alternative means of applying. As well as the new core encourages filmmakers to discuss their plans to ensure their project is inclusive and accessible from production all the way through distribution and audience launch, right? And then all these costs are included in the project's budget. And then, some language has been updated really in the aims of making it more inclusive and accessible. And then also, some of the word counts have been updated. But just to remind people, these are maximum word lengths. They're not a minimum. They're not even a suggested length. So this is really there to give you flexibility. That's why the word counts are fairly high. So now that next slide, please. Now that the core is launched, what's next? So this is kind of the exciting part, right? So we're really hoping that funding organizations, fiscal sponsors, artist support organizations, both in the US and abroad, will incorporate the questions into their processes. The more comprehensive and broad the usage, the more successful we as a field can be in supporting filmmakers by reducing the burden of the proposal rewriting, right? Also, this is a living document. We want to hear, your constructive feedback with the aims of updating this checklist every 18 to 24 months. And then we're also committed to building out resources to support artists in their fundraising journeys. So we will be convening working groups to build out a glossary, looking at language that we're using, defining what those words mean, looking at standardizing, developing a impact funding application, also discussing standardizing reporting guidelines. There's a working group focused on exploring alternative submission methods and accessibility. And then a very important one as well is outreaching to partners in the field to prompt them, to urge them, to encourage them to adopt the core app into their process. So, thank you guys so much for listening. We will be, we'll look forward to seeing you in the breakout room. We can talk more about the core app, any questions you might have, and how to join the breakout groups. And now I will pass it over to Sean Welsh, I think.
I'm here. Hi, everybody. I'm speaking today on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. My name is Sean Welsh. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a bespectacled white man with a greying beard and a black baseball cap. And I'm sitting in a lovely hotel room. So I'm a professional subtitler and as Matchbox Cine Club, an independent film exhibitor. For a few years now, I've combined the two as Matchbox CineSub, creating access materials for films. We're based in the UK, as you might be able to tell from the accents, Scotland particularly. And the majority of our clients are UK based, but we work internationally. The UK has a lot of institutional support for accessibility, particularly via the BFI and the film hubs that administer funds to the various regions. But we saw that there was both a practical knowledge gap and a budget gap, stopping the reliable delivery of accessible screenings, both of which issues Matchbox could address. So we now work with distributors, festivals, filmmakers, venues, and various organizations to create descriptive subtitle files and audio description for theatrical, digital, and physical distribution. We've also become industry advocates for accessibility, so we spend a lot of time advising clients, colleagues, and collaborators on how to make their films and screenings more accessible. At this point, we've created access materials for almost 2,000 films and short films. So that's who we are. In the process of all this practical work and advocacy, we realized there was no way of tracking or researching access materials for films. Up until now, this has meant duplication of work and also a lot of materials going unused, as well as from a commercial point of view, unexploited. What I mean by that is that we become aware of what we'd commissioned as access materials, some of which already existed elsewhere, had been made or by a previous festival or by a filmmaker even for a previous screening or release. We also knew that our clients weren't proactively sharing the files they commissioned with filmmakers and distributors, and that even if they were, the filmmakers or distributors and sales agents often had no idea what they were. It followed that someone else would likely end up redoing the work that we'd already done. And from a commercial sense, we saw that access materials made in one region would often not be used or shared or licensed when a film was released in another territory. Particularly relevant because the excuse for lack of access materials and distribution frequently offered to the audience who needs them is invariably budgetary. On top of which, we knew this knowledge gap existed and that the materials we made were regularly single use, where they would ideally be used again and again for multiple future screenings and releases. So that was the impetus for Sidecard, a website that we created with the support and collaboration of Inclusive Cinema and Film Hub Wales, Film Hub Scotland, and the Independent Cinema Office, all based in the UK. You can find it at sidecard.co.uk. I'll just share a wee link to that, and I'll share my screen momentarily so you can see the actual site. It's free to use and open to anyone internationally who has commissioned or created access materials to log them. No files are stored on the site, simple details, and the idea is that you can contact whoever holds the access materials you need and take it from there. We encourage the free sharing of those materials, but it's not a prerequisite. If a festival wishes to share freely, they can. If a distributor wishes to charge another distributor a small fee, then that's up to them. I'll just share my screen so you can have a look at this PowerPoint presentation, which has a helpful QR code to the site itself, which you hopefully should be able to see in the top right-hand corner. So far, we've largely been inviting people to take part, but the site is now fully operational and open to anyone. Participants so far include Mubi, who've uploaded details of all the descriptive subtitles and audio description that they've created for films they distribute theatrically. Also Park Circus, who've added details of all the accessible DCPs they hold for major studios that they represent, and several festivals, principally UK-based festivals, but international in scope, including Open City Documentary Festival, Glasgow Short Film Festival, and Take One Action Film Festival, as well as a range of materials that Matchbox have created for their own events, because since 2019, every screening or festival we produce ourselves has descriptive subtitles on screen by default. So they're open captioned. I will just share the actual site with you momentarily, and we can have a wee look at what it actually entails. So yes, this is Sidecard. This is the site itself. We've endeavored to make the actual site as accessible as possible. But you can see here, this is what it looks like. So basically, you can search for any subtitle file, any film really that you're looking for is the main thing. If we do a demonstration via DAI, which has been discussed a wee bit at the festival, the conference rather already. If I click on that, you can see that Mubi created a file for that. It's a subtitle file, descriptive subtitles. You can even see the frame rate. And if you were wanting to make use of this file in any context, you would just contact Mubi, subtitles@mubi.com. Similarly, another one, A Night of Knowing Nothing, we can have a look at. That was made or commissioned by the ICO, and if you wanted to make use of that file, you could contact Duncan Carson at the Independent Cinema Office, and he could put you in touch with the person who manages the file. So there's many ways to use the site itself, Sidecard. You can see it kind of defaults to this front page, which lists everything alphabetically, but it can be arranged and filtered depending on what you're looking for. So the idea is that you can look for a film that you specifically are interested in, or you can narrow down your search based upon parameters. So we want to make this useful for programmers who might have a specific season with specific needs, and they can zero in on what access materials are already available, because that's part of the issue is, of course, that budgetary restraints restrict accessibility, and this is one way that we can counter that. So the whole site can be filtered on the duration of the film, because also that's important. You know, if you only have a 90-minute duration or slot in your festival program, you can filter it down on that basis, and then you can see all the films that are around about 85 minutes or less. You can then also filter it to the year. So you could filter it to just films made in 1970s with a little bit of fiddling around. And you can also, because we have the site tied in with the movie database, the other website, basically when a film is uploaded or details of a film is uploaded, it will ping the movie database and auto-populate some of the site based on that. So it basically helps us moderate the uploads to make sure that they're accurate. And also it also has the side effect of pulling through these genres and things like that. So you can filter down. There's evidently no family films made in 1974, between 1974 and 1986, that are on Sidecard anyway. But you can filter down on that basis. And again, you can filter down on year. You can filter based on the kind of access material, because basically the idea is that all sidecar materials, and by sidecar, that's anything that's outside the film itself. So not hard coded. So we have subtitle files or audio description files. There's also, we've all, the site is future-proofed, because there's a lot of new interesting areas for sidecar access materials that haven't been fully pursued for lots of various reasons, and that kind of speaks towards autism-friendly screenings and materials that are made to support those. And we also made sure that if you have a DCP, as Park Circus have many DCPs with subtitles packaged in them, that even though it's not technically a sidecard file, we could still log the details of it as so. And there's no, we also acknowledge that quite a lot of the time festivals make non-professional subtitle files that are captioned files. And so we want to make sure that that work is also tracked and potentially used as a basis for to version up to more theatrical quality. So far, there's nothing on the site that is non-professional, but we have the facility for that. The other thing, I'm conscious of my time here, but the other thing that Sidecard is hoping to address is that knowledge gap. And so for that reason, we have a brace of guides on the site so that you can you can look at best practice for accessible screenings depending on what kind of organization or participant you are. So if there's a basic how to use the site, then there's a guide for distributors, a guide for festivals, a guide for filmmakers, a guide for venues, and then general resources. That's all text-based, but you can also download it as a PDF to take away with you. And then there's, I think this is one of the most useful things, the general glossary, because we found that there were a variety of glossaries out there to help you understand terms around subtitling and access materials, and also general film materials. But we put them all in the one place with descriptions, and this is a kind of work in progress as well. We'll be developing this and adding to it. So yeah, that's basically Sidecard. We hope that it's going to be built into delivery paths for funders and for other organisations, particularly in the UK with the BFI. They support films and release, and so part of the conditions for that funding is that access materials are produced, but they're not well tracked once they're produced, and there's also a question of quality and ticking boxes and producing those materials. So we hope that it makes sense. We're determined, in fact, that the BFI will use Sidecard, given that the BFI have some stake in it. You can see their logo at the bottom there because they part funded it. That they will use it as a resource to collect the materials that they require to be commissioned. And again, it's international in focus because we don't host any files on the site. We neatly sidestep any questions of the legality, because obviously sidecar files are used to delineate territorial and contractual limits. And different territories have different approaches to the copyright around subtitles. France in particular is very different to the UK. So while we encourage the free use of these materials and the free sharing of them, the Sidecard site itself just puts you in touch with whoever you can contact to make use of them. And after that, the conversation can continue. As I say, we would generally encourage people to make them freely available, but if it's a small fee versus commissioning from scratch, that's all to the good. And I think also we hope that, further upstream of exhibitors, if there's the distributors, as I say, in different territories, frequently a complaint of the audience that subtitles isn't on, for example, Amazon in the US, but not Amazon in the UK. And evidently that's because they're different distributors, but we would encourage people to share them, a more collaborative, collegiate approach to these things. But at the very least, we could expect to make it easier to put these people in touch and to speak to each other. So yes, I think that's pretty much it. We can probably segue to the actual questions. I'll stop the share here. So we have some questions, do we? I'm seeing some questions in the chat. Hold on a second.
Yes, there. Hi, Sean. It's Jonathan. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, how you doing?
Hello.
I can hear you, yes, but
yes. Hi, Sean. Morning.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah, we've already got some questions in the chat. I think you're seeing them.
Yeah.
Starting to come in. People are really excited by this resource. I'm just trying to slide. Can you hear me? How do we slide up and down here with this?
I see Andre Perez has said that ended up burning the subtitles into the film in order to ensure that they would be used. Absolutely. That doesn't preclude their login on Sidecard at all. And frequently the Sidecard files that we produce are burned in for exhibition. So, and as I say, Sidecard, even though it's in the name, we don't want to obstruct people to upload the details of the stuff.
I could do it from my laptop. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up the chat on my laptop because the tablet was giving us some trouble.
Okay.
Yeah. So Andre did say about burning the files into the film to ensure that they would be used. Question from Jennifer Huang. She says, first of all, this is really great. Are you considering adding a field where producers could simply upload the SRT to the side for instant download?
That's definitely something we considered at first. As I say, I may have addressed this and as I talked on after the question, but there is a question about the legality of sharing the subtitle files, and also that sometimes they change hands. You know, if a film is sold and the materials are licensed, suddenly it's a different person that's in charge of them, and they might not feel the same way about sharing them. But another festival that we kind of that was part of our basic group had suggested that it would be an idea that they would actually find it easier to manage uploading. You know, if you have like a festival program that's like 100 films and you have had them all captioned, it's tricky. We've made it as easy as possible with a bulk upload option, but it's still extra work. And so ideally they would just put all the files that they've created into a Dropbox folder and tell people to have at it, which is not necessarily, we wouldn't necessarily not do that. It's just that in order to make the site as practical immediately and as possible, we haven't done that already. But it's certainly something that we would consider. We tried to make the site as modular as possible so that like we can build in new features. And yeah, that would be a good thing to be able to do. But in the meantime, we want to make sure people can just easily make contact with whoever manages the files and can give permission for them to be used.
Sure, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew Perez has a question. Does this also work for subtitles or translations in other languages, not only English?
It does. The only limit that we assign to it is that it's access materials, so descriptive subtitles or captions. But we do already have, for example, some French captions, which were actually files that we commissioned ourselves for a screening of a film called Crime Wave. We had French SDH or descriptive subtitles made, so they are on the site. But in terms of translations of films, that's not really what Sidecard's for, and I think we need to kind of try to delineate it in that sense. So yes, and also no, in some way.
Gotcha, thank you. From Jim Bracker, I think it's pronounced. Do you have links to best practices for these files, best practices for captions, etc.?
Hi, Jim. Yes, we do, and this also be something that I continue to talk about after the question, but we do have the how-to guides on the site itself, which are, they do encompass best practice for dealing with the files, commissioning them, handling them, not necessarily how to make them, like in terms of quality of the subtitle files to an extent. But what we've done is we've linked in the resources page to others and to other standards as well, because obviously it's one thing that's really missing from internationally and almost anywhere really is a standard of quality for descriptive subtitles or captions. There are certain, I think you have the ADA here, obviously, you have certain quality, minimum quality that has to be met. But in terms of what constitutes good theatrical quality, you know, best ideal, you know, quality subtitles, that's not an industry standard. So we've linked wherever we can to resources that suggest something towards that. But there's also lots of different ways to approach access materials. There's no definitive style guide, but in terms of handling the files and how to approach delivering them in lots of ways, there's lots of information on Sidecard. But again, we will build in more stuff as it comes, and we're open to feedback as much as possible. I'll put in an email
and a follow-up
quickly,
from Jim.
Yeah.
Are you considering a set vocabulary of metadata for easy organizing during upload and download?
Yes, we have a template CSV for bulk upload, which gives you categories, basically breaks it down into the necessary information. We have basic information that's required in order to help us with the moderation. So we have to have the title, the director of the year, and the duration, and that's just the easiest way for us to make sure that we have the correct film. And as I say, we have that connection to the movie database. So when things are uploaded to Sidecard, it pings the movie database and checks that there's information there, and then flags any discrepancies and allows us to kind of zero down on that. So yes, there is. We also suggest it's useful to have a kind of standard information in the file name, but that's not necessary for uploading to Sidecard. If that makes sense.
I'm going to say I think it does.
Okay.
I don't think we have any more questions. Although we have a comment here from Alison O'Daniel. I think it would be interesting to read it. If
Yes.
anyone wants info on how to caption from a deaf, hard of hearing perspective, I recently added a very informal page to my website, not industry standard by any means, but from lived experience. AlisonO'Daniel.com/how-to-caption. Also, Sean will be on a panel I'm moderating tomorrow about access with disabled filmmakers. So yes, a good reminder that there is a panel tomorrow that Sean will be on, along with Alison and a number of other wonderful speakers. And Jim says, yes, you have answered this question. Question from Emerson Gu, who happens to be one of Documentary Magazine's editorial fellows. Will Sidecard support unauthorized, in quotation marks, captions made by fans or viewers?
Hi, Emerson. Yes. I mean, we have the option for non-professional. So I mean, we haven't. We don't have a facility to check that, but we basically allow for it. So anyone can upload to Sidecard. You have to register to sign up, but there's no fee or anything like that. And basically, you just have to give your email address, and then you can add stuff. Nothing gets published to the site until it's moderated. The details, that is. So as long as you have the basic information of the file, and if you click non-professional, that's probably the best way to approach it. So yeah, that's what we wanted to make sure, that we know that there's a big kind of gig economy in terms of producing access files, especially for festivals. But we're also aware that these files can be, because their needs must, they're made very quickly and they're often made by volunteers. So they're useful to an extent, but we also have to kind of have some kind of line where we say, sometimes bad subtitles are not better than none at all. That's just a kind of a case of the effectiveness of the actual subtitles. So we allow for it for sure, and we're not like making any value judgments on the uploads. So yeah, I think that's I could have probably just said yes to that question.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. We don't seem to have any more questions now. But again, the comments have just been excellent. People really seem to be excited by your presentation, Sean. And I'm sure there will be people who will be wanting to know more. So they can go to the website, but they can also get in touch with Matchbox Cine, if I'm not mistaken, at matchboxcine@gmail.com. Yes?
Yes, well, my email address is, we have a kind of more official looking one. I'll put it in the chat as well. And you can find, I put the website for Sidecard, the contact email address for Sidecard, and that's the link for Matchbox's own website in the chat as well. So we are open to any feedback and any questions at all. Get us in any kind of platform you can get us, and we'll speak to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So again, hello@sidecard.co.uk, Sean at matchboxcine.com, and matchboxcineclub.com/subtitling are the ways to get in touch. Once again, Sean, thank you so much for this presentation. This is a wonderful and exciting resource. I think that there's a lot that is going to come out of it. And once again, we look forward to the panel tomorrow that you'll be on. So everyone, I'm sure you'll be tuning in to that as well. So we look forward to that. So thank you again, Sean.
Thank you, and thank you, Candice. Andy?